Hello YouTube and welcome back to World of Warships with Wadrace. Today's vid comes to you via subscriber suggestion, and I will be discussing the subject of premium aircraft carriers. I will also discuss the ship and commander builds, and afterwards I will make a recommendation regarding which of the premium aircraft carriers I believe is the most user-friendly to newer CV players, and you can watch a battle in each to see how they perform for yourselves. Also, before I get too far along, I wish to say thank you to Miss Chloe Holroyd for suggesting that I make this vid. Now, to start with, let's go ahead and discuss upgrade modules. Being Tier 8s, all of the premium CVs have 5 upgrade slots, and I strongly recommend opting for the CV-specific modules. In Slot 1, this is Air Groups Modification 1. This module gives a 20% speed bonus to aircraft returning to the aircraft carrier, greatly improving the rate at which aircraft are recovered following successful attacks. Provided they escape the enemy's AA bubble, this will improve the turnaround time of your squadrons and allow you to get them back out on target faster. For Slot 2, you are looking at Aircraft Engines Mod 1. This module extends the boost time of aircraft by 10%. This offers greater utility relative to Damage Control 1, which really only influences your ability to mitigate damage while being fired upon. That being said, if you are being fired on, chances are you have much bigger things to be worrying about anyway. AEM 1, however, allows your aircraft to travel faster, longer, shortening the time to reach target, and can also influence your ability to maneuver while harassing a target. Next up is Slot 3, which offers a couple of different options. Here, I recommend opting for Torpedo Bombers Mod 1. This increases the attack runtime of torpedo bombers by 5 seconds, allowing you more time to maneuver and aim while conducting torpedo strikes. This may not seem like much, but it can make a huge difference if you find yourself having to maneuver significantly after initiating a run. This would allow you to start further back and have more time for your aim to settle if you're forced to maneuver. On the downside, however, it's also 5 seconds longer you're locked into an attack run should you be forced to abort a drop for any reason, such as your target being destroyed, or simply deciding the attack run will be ineffective. On the other hand, Attack Aircraft Mod 1 increases the runtime of attack aircraft by 2 seconds. This can occasionally be useful when chasing down that pesky destroyer. However, between the low detection range of destroyers and the preparation time of rocket attacks, I actually find I tend to overshoot in the preparation phase far more often than I find myself wishing I had more time to carry out a rocket strike. Your mileage may vary, but personally I think it's better to have the added time for torp strikes instead of rocket strikes. If you'd rather have neither, there is AA Guns Mod 1, but that only gives you 2 more flak bursts from your medium and long-range AA batteries, which I personally feel does not offer much utility relative to increased attack time upgrades. Being an aggressive player, I do tend to opt more for the offensive rather than defensive upgrades. Now, with slots 1 through 3 out of the way, Slot 4 offers us yet more decisions. Here we have Attack Aircraft Mod 2, Torpedo Bombers Mod 2, and Bombers Mod 2. There is, of course, Damage Control Mod 2, but as I already discussed, if you're trying to mitigate fire and flood damage in a CV, chances are that those are the least of your worries. So I'm not really going to discuss that too much further. AAM2, TBM2, and BM2 all give an extra 7.5% to the health of your aircraft squadrons. This can significantly extend the amount of time that a particular aircraft type can spend in enemy AA bubbles before losing aircraft, therefore allowing you to conduct successive strikes more successfully. Given that I believe torpedo bombers are and always will be the most reliable source of damage for any CV, I personally opt for TBM2. Next, there's Upgrade Slot 5, which in my opinion is more cut and dry. Here you have the option between Flight Control Mod 1 and Concealment Mod 1. Concealment Mod 1 reduces the detectability of aircraft and hull by 10% and increases an attacker's dispersion by 5%. The Flight Control Module 2 decreases the restoration time of aircraft by 5% and increases the deck space by 2 for all aircraft types. Again, from a personal perspective, I believe Flight Control Mod 1 has more utility for a CV. To be perfectly honest, if you're relying on your concealment in a CV in the first place, you're probably doing something wrong as it is. Using the Saipan as an example, her attack planes restore in 111 seconds. Torp bombers restore every 135 seconds, and her bombers take 128 seconds. This is with more than one restoration bonus, I might add, and she's taking 2 minutes to restore planes, so you really want to bring those numbers down as much as possible. The other restoration reduction, of course, comes from one of the commander skills I will be discussing a little bit later. Now, the upgrade build I'm finding to be a fair constant, not only for the premium ships, but also for the regular Techline ships. There is one standout exception, however, and that is, as soon as I navigate my port correctly here, no, I don't want the Kaga. Come on, work with me here. There she is. The Graf Zeppelin is the only exception in which I have opted to fit Secondary Battery Mod 1. She is the only CV I have found to deviate from this standard build because, true to German form, she has a wonderful array of nice, long-range secondary batteries. SBM-1 increases their range and accuracy by 20%, which, if you saw my Graf Zeppelin review vid, allows her quite the ability to deal damage should she be forced to defend herself from surface ships at close quarters like destroyers or, say, an Iowa-class battleship. In fact, I think I can safely say that I owe the 30k damage my secondaries did to that Iowa entirely to this module. Also, given that her aircraft are generally faster than those of the other CVs, it's one CV in which I feel comfortable opting away from Torpedo Run Extension mod. Her TBs can charge in quickly, their reticle generally narrows down nicely enough in the time given, and I've just felt that I don't need as much time getting her attacks in order. She is, however, the only real edge case to what I consider the standard CV build. As a bit of a side note, that is a very beautiful ship, if I do say so. Anyway, on that note, I suppose we'll backtrack on over to the Saipan again. No, not the Kaga. I keep doing that, don't I? And anyway, from there we will discuss the commander skills. Now, this is a new CV player recommendation, so I am going to focus on the first 10 skill points, and then I will show one of my more developed CV captains. First, we want air supremacy, then torp acceleration, aircraft armor, and sight stabilization. I will also go on record to show that this is the standard first 10 points for all of my CV captains. Air supremacy reduces the restoration time of aircraft by a further 5%. At the cost of range, torp acceleration makes your torps 5 knots faster. This is a useful skill in that it means slightly less lead you need to give on a target when making torpedo runs, and can lead your torp hits being far more consistent in my experience. I don't concern myself overly much with the range, because honestly trying to torp at long range to me just means more chances the enemy has to evade your drop and nullify your damage output. On top of the fact that they're gonna know your planes were making a run anyway, in my opinion, so I'd rather guarantee a hit than trying to play chicken. Aircraft armor, by comparison, is a big skill. This one reduces the aircraft damage received from continuous sources by 10%. This is a huge skill when it comes to the survivability of your aircraft, and definitely a no-brainer when it comes to just ensuring your aircraft get through. The tankier your planes are, the better your experience will be, hands down. I suppose if you want to live dangerously, you can pass it up, but I just feel there's going to be way too much lost utility there if you do. Lastly, we have sight stabilization. This increases how quickly attack planes and torp bombers will aim by 5%, and increases the aim speed of bombers by 10%. Now, provided you aren't maneuvering too heavily, this means your aiming reticle will narrow down faster, ensuring better accuracy of your attack runs, which we all know can lead to more consistent damage output. This, paired with the upgrade module TBM-1, can allow you more room to maneuver if necessary, and still ensure your aim will be as good as possible when you're ready to drop. Though you still don't want to maneuver too much, or your spreads will still go wide as hell. So, anyway, those are the first 10 skill points, and these are skills that I see as being universal for all CVs, not just for the premiums. With them, there's just way too much utility that would be wasted, and even survivability for your aircraft squadrons. So not going for them is pretty much guaranteed to hurt no matter what you do. Anyway, on that note, give me a few seconds to switch over here to my Midway. Okay, there we go. Now, this is only an 18-point captain, not a 19-pointer, but you can see I've opted for a handful of smaller skills. Oh, and by the way, Graf Zeppelin, again, is going to be a unique case in that as I develop her commander, I'm probably going to opt for manual secondaries, despite the game saying I shouldn't. Yes, I could opt for AFT and further extend her secondary range, and also the explosion radius of her flak bursts. I'm not sure I want to do that, however, mainly because those lovely German secondaries already have a phenomenal 7.5 kilometer range, which is substantial enough to threaten most destroyers that would be pushing in already. As such, I think if I'm between squadrons at any point, I'd rather have the additional accuracy given to my secondary batteries just to make them more of a threat rather than a simple suggestion to stay away. But that's just my 2 cents on the issue. Anyway, now let's head back on over to the Midway. Now, here the additional skills I have opted for include improved engine boost, which improves the engine boost time by a further 10%, which, as I've already mentioned earlier, that's longer and faster that you can spend getting to target. Last gasp, which restores the engine boost for an aircraft carrier's last attack flight. So it just makes maneuvering around a little bit easier in that regard. Improved engines improves the overall squadron speed of all aircraft squadrons by 2.5%. So again, this is faster that you can get to and from target. And then, of course, there's Survivability Expert, which for each tier of aircraft adds 15 points to the health pool of an aircraft. So say, in the case of the Midway, this is an extra 150 points to the health pool of each individual aircraft. And this will greatly, again, provide survivability to your aircraft, allowing you to stay in those AA bubbles a little bit longer and perform your strikes, have more time to perform successive strikes even. So it's definitely a marginal skill, but definitely something that I think you will get some good utility from. One skill, just like with the modules, that I am probably not going to opt for is Concealment Expert skill. Now again, paired with the Concealment module Mod 1, this reduces the detectability of aircraft by 10%, so overall I think like a 19 or 18% total decrease to your overall detectability. Personally, again, in a CV, I think this is a rather useless skill, because again, if you're relying on your concealment in an aircraft carrier in the first place, you're kind of positioning yourself a little too poorly. So there is that to have in the back of your mind in regards to that. I don't really understand concealment builds for larger ships, or ships that should basically not be getting into the fray in the first place. Ships like aircraft carriers and battleships. Now, battleships are a little bit of a different case because they're kind of visible from the moon anyway once they fire their guns. But anyway, the other thing with the concealment builds, though, with aircraft carriers, though, is when you're looking at any of your aircraft, torpedo bombers, dive bombers, attack planes, they are visible from 10 kilometers without any concealment modifications. Take into consideration that a lot of your anti-air batteries, those are going to be opening up at 6 kilometers. So you're not avoiding any AA here, really, unless you're actually staying outside of AA bubbles, which, okay, granted, with the Hakuryu, which does have a long-range torpedo build, you can drop torpedoes from outside of the AA bubbles and turn around and not have to take any AA at all, really. But, I mean, even battleships, at the longest, their AA range goes out to 5.8 kilometers. So your detectability is not really helping you here as far as avoiding any AA. The other thing is, again, as far as I'm concerned, stealth builds for aircraft, I mean, dropping your concealment down to 8 kilometers, I mean, they're already going to know you're there before their AA batteries even open up. So, in my opinion, aircraft concealment is kind of already worthless. And if you're trying to torpedo bomb at long range, as I mentioned earlier, I can't help but think that that's one of the most useless things you can do. There's way too much that can happen between dropping the torpedoes and actually reaching target where the enemy's just going to be able to evade those torpedoes. I would rather drop right on top of my target and ensure the consistent damage right then and there than try to mess at all with dropping my torpedoes at long range and maybe get one torpedo hit once torpedo spreads are also taken into account. Because if you're dropping at long range, the other thing that you're considering doing is also how quickly are you dropping? Are you just dropping torpedoes for the sake of dropping them, or are you actually trying to aim those torpedoes? Which, either way, it's yeah. The other thing is, when you're talking about concealment with the aircraft carriers, I mean, say Graf Zeppelin, which is probably the only aircraft carrier I can conceivably see utilizing that skill at all. I mean, she's visible from 15.7 kilometers no matter. So if you opt for concealment modifications, concealment skills, yeah, you can drop her concealment down to, what, 13, 12 kilometers, maybe, at best. I mean, she's still going to be visible well before her aircraft are, and in those cases, again, if you're using your concealment in an aircraft carrier, you're doing something wrong. You're getting way too close to the enemy for comfort in most aircraft carriers anyway, if you're relying on aircraft carrier concealment. Best case scenario, you really want to try and keep like 15, 20 kilometers between your aircraft carrier and enemy aircraft anyway, or sorry, enemy ships anyway. So, in my opinion, there's really no merit to having concealment on an aircraft carrier. On top of that, if you've got a ship that's charging you down like a destroyer, they're probably going to be well inside your detectability range anyway before they're going to be doing much. So, again, just something to keep in mind. As I mentioned, of course, earlier, there is the Hakuryu, which does have torpedo squadron loadouts that have a 7.5 kilometer range. And this is also with torpedo acceleration on my Hakuryu, I might add. So, wait, no, not the... Sorry, 6.4 kilometer range on her torpedoes. I take it back. And this is after the torpedo acceleration module, I might add. So there is still the ability to drop torpedoes at long range without getting into the AA bubbles, but even then, you're still detected long before you actually drop those torpedoes, so I don't see the point in concealment builds. I really don't. And it's just one of those things that I would, again, just rather ensure that my torpedo drops, that my attack runs are going to be performed accurately, rather than just messing with any of the overall issues of range. It's just far more consistent when you're dropping at the minimum, the minimum distance to ensure the arming range, and just making sure your torpedoes are actually going to hit the target in the first place. Yes, you do end up inside of the AA bubbles of enemy ships and risk losing planes, but again, there's no reward without risk. Now let's go ahead and discuss stats. Saipan is the smallest of the premium CVs and therefore has the smallest health pool at 47,900, paired with a 4% torp damage reduction, so she will eat torp damage like there is no tomorrow. Compare that to the Graf Zeppelin at 52,600 HP and 16% torp damage reduction. The Enterprise at 51,400 and 28% torp damage reduction. Lastly, there is the Kaga, the largest of the CVs, with 54,200 hit points and a 22% torp damage reduction. Looking at the armor profiles, the Kaga, you can see that these are very thinly armored ships in most cases. So they will eat HE damage from most sources up to and including most destroyers. The Enterprise and the Graf Zeppelin are a couple of exceptions in the fact that they do have armored decks, but even then there's still only 25 millimeters of deck armor. So chances are they're still going to eat at least HE from cruisers with, like, there's absolutely no tomorrow and not a whole lot that you'll be able to do to mitigate it. Beyond that, their armor belts are nice and thick, so if battleships shoot at them and hit those armor belts, they will eat citadels very, very quickly. So definitely ships you kind of want to keep away from the front lines as much as possible. Talking about planes, all CVs, as anyone knows by now, have 3 plane types: rocket attack planes, torpedo bombers, and regular bombers. On the Saipan, the rocket attack planes have 1,660 hit points, torpedo bombers have 2,204 hit points with TBM2, and the dive bombers have 2,160 hit points. These are top-tier aircraft, so they are reasonably fast, and as you saw earlier, the attack planes restore in 111 seconds, TBs in 135, and bombers in 128 seconds. And this is after all of the restoration upgrades and skills are taken into account. All aircraft are visible at the base range of 10 kilometers, and their damage is respectable. Also, being Tier 10 aircraft, these aircraft are nice and nimble, so they can get to and from target with relative ease. Slipping over to the Graf Zeppelin, you can see that her planes have far lower survivability. The attack planes 1,130 HP, torpedo bombers 1,580, and bombers 1,410. As far as restoration time, the attack planes restore in 71 seconds, TBs in 72, and bombers every 83 seconds. Making up for their low survivability, however, the GZ's planes have the fastest base and boost speeds, allowing them to get in and out of enemy AA as quickly as possible. They are also seen at the base detection range of 10 kilometers. Enterprise's planes are lower tier and therefore lower survivability, with their attack planes only having 1,300 hit points. Torp bombers have 1,656 hit points, and bombers have 1,780. As far as restoration times, the attack planes regenerate every 44 seconds. The torpedo bombers restore every 54 seconds, and bombers every 69 seconds. And all aircraft have the standard 10-kilometer base detection range. Last but not least, we have the Kaga. Her attack planes have 1,110 HP, restoring every 89 seconds. Her torpedo bombers have 1,322 hit points, restoring every 81 seconds. And her bombers have 1,100 hit points, restoring every 64 seconds. Now, something else to mention is that the Kaga and the Enterprise both have unique features. The Enterprise, for the US aircraft carriers, is the only aircraft carrier to have AP bombs, whereas the Kaga compared to her tech line, only has HE dive bombers. So they are unique in the sense that their damage output can come from different sources relative to their tech line counterparts. They also both boast having lower tier aircraft with relatively large deck sizes, but this is why their aircraft restore so quickly and have such low health pools. Now, these are all aircraft carriers, so aircraft are your primary armament. However, all aircraft carriers do still have some level of secondary batteries for the purpose of self-defense, with the exception of the Saipan for whatever reason, which has absolutely no secondary batteries to speak of. But other than that, the Kaga Enterprise do have some reasonable secondary arrays. The Graf Zeppelin, however, is the only aircraft carrier that I feel has secondary batteries that are worth investing in, just because of their size, their power, and long-range capabilities. As far as AA defenses, they do have some relatively standard AA, 218 continuous for the short-range AA on the Graf Zeppelin. Mid-range has 218 as well, and long-range AA does 151 for continuous damage, also having 1190 damage within the flak bursts. As far as the Kaga, her AA does 203 continuous at short range, 133 at long range, with 1260 damage per flak burst possible. She only has the long and short range. The Enterprise has 783 continuous from her short range, 389 from her mid-range, and 107 from her long range, with 1260 damage per flak burst. And, of course, there is the Saipan, which does have AA batteries, but due to the fact that she is lacking larger caliber guns, these numbers aren't exactly spectacular. 429 for her short range, 396 for her long range, with flak bursts only producing 770 damage. So yeah, Saipan's definitely gonna suck in the AA game, so to put it mildly. Moving on to maneuverability stats, the Saipan is relatively nimble at 33 knots. She has a 920 meter turning circle and a 15.9 second rudder shift. Enterprise makes 32.5 knots with a 1070 meter turning circle and a 13.1 second rudder shift. Kaga is the slowest at 28 knots, 1080 meter turning circle and 14.4 second rudder shift. And the Graf Zeppelin sees 32 knots with the largest turning circle at 1140 meters and a 13.7 second rudder shift. Overall, with the exception of the Kaga, these are somewhat nimble carriers, so they can definitely move around. Saipan, of course, being the smallest and the fastest, so some good values there. From the surface, the Saipan is seen at 11.9 kilometers, 10.2 kilometers from the air, and of course all ships have the standard 2 kilometers assured detection range, so definitely not worth investing in any concealment builds there anyway. Enterprise is seen from 14.1 kilometers with 11 kilometer detect from the air. Kaga is seen at 12.2 kilometers, 10.9 kilometers from aircraft. And the Graf Zeppelin is seen at 15.7 kilometers, and her air detect from aircraft is 11.1 kilometers. One final statistic that is especially relevant for aircraft carriers is actually their deck size. This is the number of aircraft they can have ready to go at any given time, and it can influence how quickly they can perform strikes. For the Saipan, she can carry 11 of her attack aircraft on deck at any given time. And this is why the restoration time is also important, because it determines how well or how quickly those are refilled. She also decks 11 torpedo bombers and 11 bombers. And for her squadron size, that's about 1.5 runs, provided her planes don't get shot down and never make it back. The Enterprise also has some reasonably good spreads, with her deck holding 20 attack planes and 16 of each torpedo bombers and regular dive bombers. And given the squadron size, this is about 2 full air attack runs before you start really seeing your numbers getting hurt overall. For the Kaga, she has the largest deck size, with 26 attack aircraft on the deck at any given time, at most. So that's, when you consider her attack squadrons are 8, that's 3 full attack runs before you even start feeling your losses. That's also 38 for the torpedo bombers and 38 for the dive bombers, which with 12 attack aircraft per squadron, that's still 3 full runs before you really start feeling those losses at all. The Graf Zeppelin, her deck size for attack aircraft is 14, so she gets about 2 runs out before she starts feeling her losses, regardless of aircraft type. And she also decks, I think, 16 torpedo bombers and 14 regular bombers. And those numbers are just, again, very good for determining how long you can hold out against heavy AA defenses. The Kaga can definitely hold out a little bit better just because of her sheer deck size. I mean, 3 regular runs overall? Yeah. Anyway, we are now at the point in the video where I discuss my recommendation regarding premium aircraft carrier for a new CV player. And, well, this is kind of one of those things that I've kind of bounced back and forth a little bit on over the last couple of days after performing a few battles, especially in preparation for this video. Because one of the things that I wanted to do was have kind of an interesting spread. I did 3 matches in each carrier, and the videos that you're going to be seeing regarding gameplay are the best of each of the 3 runs for the ships. The only one that really had a different run was, I think, the Graf Zeppelin, and that one was a little bit of a fluke. That one was actually the 4th run, and I don't know, there was just something about that run that made me say, okay. That run just turned out, that last 4th run just turned out phenomenal. So, but all the others did get the 3 that I had originally intended. Again, the Graf Zeppelin just had a little bit of a fluke on her. But overall, the highest recommendations that I can make actually come out as being a little bit different than I would have, say, back when we were still working with the RTS aircraft carriers. And granted, I will say that some of my initial recommendations would have been made based off of those RTS stats, which no longer exist, and I will freely admit this. Having said that, I do still firmly believe that in some ways those recommendations can still stand, and for some of the same reasons. For example, my first and foremost recommendation is going to be the Saipan. And I'm sure some of you are probably going to stop and say, where the hell is this coming from? Because the Saipan really is lousy in regards to its deck size. Yes, the Saipan's deck size is lousy, but you also have to look at how many aircraft she has. She has, or not how many aircraft, but the tier of the aircraft she has. She is basically running the tier 10 aircraft that you see on the Midway. So her aircraft, her attack planes, dive bombers, torpedo bombers, they are very survivable aircraft, even for tier 8s. In top tier, the Saipan excels because she can run circles around everything, and the AA is light enough that she really doesn't see enough damage to be concerned with the AA at tier 6. It's not until you get to tier 8 where, okay, that dex, you really start feeling that smaller deck size, and yeah, if you get up to tier 10, she can suffer, specifically for her deck size. Her planes, on the other hand, still perform very well as long as you don't abuse them. You just have to learn to play them a little bit more safe. And in that regard, maybe she's not the best recommendation for newer players, but I do think she is still a strong recommendation, and that is primarily because her aircraft do have their survivability and their speed going for them. I will say that she would probably be a strong second recommendation, but where I would have thought previously she would be a good first recommendation under the RTS guidelines. Again, she's a strong second. She definitely can hold her own in the right circumstances. That being said, she is also very, very punishing towards mistakes. So in that regard, I think she can also be a good learning experience for new players because they will learn very, very quickly what they need to do in order to keep their aircraft intact. So yeah, she's demanding. Very, very demanding in some respects. But as long as you meet those demands and learn to fill them, I think she can definitely be a very good learning carrier for new players because she is so intolerant of the mistakes that you have to learn from them very, very quickly. Now I will actually come to my first recommendation. And this is the one that I was quite honestly surprised by. And that is the ship that you are currently watching in the background. That is the Imperial Japanese aircraft carrier, the Kaga. And it's purely because of her deck size. Her aircraft resupply very quickly. She can deck lots of them, so she can perform run after run after run for three times in a row before she really starts feeling any aircraft losses. And overall, she does still have very relevant strike power. Now, don't take this the wrong way. At Tier 10 AA, because these are basically the Tier 6 aircraft, she will suffer. She will suffer very heavily if she is presented targets that have very high AA ratings. Lord knows an Iowa-class battleship will shred the Kaga's planes almost before they even reach the Iowa. You're lucky if you can get one strike out of an entire flight squadron. So there is that. Yeah, these aircraft really do not have a whole lot of survivability going for them. But simply due to how many aircraft you have and the fact that she is rather forgiving of the mistakes, where the Saipan is rather unforgiving, I can see her definitely being a good aircraft carrier for getting used to the plane mechanics. Just because you have more flexibility to learn from them before you really start losing aircraft. Having said that, she does still have a lot of relevant power. And, I mean, this match is one of those cases where that power kind of shines through. Now, granted, this match also had her in the unique position of being the only ship at top tier on the teams. I mean, okay, yeah, there was I think it was a Monarch on the enemy team, which, given that these are co-op matches, it was substituted for the Tier 8 aircraft carrier. But everything else was Tier 6. And at tier 6, the AA is practically non-existent. You're almost not even losing any planes at all, even to a lot of clustered targets. So in that respect, she excels, and she is phenomenal, and you can definitely use her to great effect to farm damage. Now, the Saipan is good also for the same reasons, but her aircraft, her strike potential is reduced relative to that of any of her other Tier 8 premium counterparts. So that is one of the angle that I am having to look at from the Kaga. She has lots of planes, low survivability, but at tier 6, that survivability doesn't matter so much. And again, second recommendation, the Saipan, and it's a strong recommendation, I might add. More durable planes, but you do have the smaller deck size. The flip side, of course, being that those more durable planes do also still have phenomenal strike capacity. And I do think the Saipan, in the right circumstances, can definitely be very relevant, even if it is more punishing of the mistakes. Next, of course, I think I can say my third and fourth recommendation would have to be Graf Zeppelin, followed by the Enterprise. The Enterprise is, I mean, she does boast the lower tier aircraft, so again, she does better at lower tiers than high tiers. And honestly, I don't think the AP bombs give her enough of an identity difference from the regular mainline US aircraft carriers to really make her worth investing in some regards. I mean, granted, some of you may experience differently, but I have had a real, forgive the language, a real bitch of a time getting those AP bombers to actually work for me the way they're supposed to. Under those circumstances, I think I would very much rather have American HE dive bombers than mess with the AP at all. Because at least the HE, while it's damage that can be repaired, those HE dive bombers can produce substantially more reliable damage in my experience so far. And the same actually goes for using the AP dive bombers with the Techline Japanese. They really seem like they need to have their penetration values brought up a little bit. They don't seem to quite do what they really need to in order to work out. Then, of course, you have the Graf Zeppelin. The Graf Zeppelin, in my opinion, she can be demanding because in fact, I'm going to say it outright. She is going to be demanding. And that's because her aircraft are so quick. You do need to have the experience with aircraft carriers to be able to work with her adequately. Especially because the speed of her aircraft especially is so high. You don't have as much time to adjust to your aim, so on and so forth, and it just makes her, as far as her actual attacking performance, you really just kind of have to be more careful to watch what you're doing with her. The match in the background is concluded, so I am going to go over the stats. Ignore the EXP and credit earnings, because those were modified. All I'm looking at are the damage the ribbons earned. 149,000 damage done for a top-tier match. Phenomenal number of torpedo hits. There were bomb hits and rocket hits as well. 587 base EXP is a good value to mention. But 30 torpedo hits, 11 rocket hits, and 11 bomb hits. Sank 3 ships on my own, caused 5 floods, 5 defended ribbons, 4 fires. I mean, this is a pretty good spread of ribbons all across the way, and definitely very respectable. But also keep in mind, this is a top-tier ship. I mean, I could not have asked for better matchmaking in this regard. So, yeah, that's one thing to have in the back of your mind. And I was definitely able to focus that damage on the lower tier targets. I mean, yeah, I kind of had to focus the Monarch early on just because that Tier 8 AA was going to shred my planes to holy hell. But once I got rid of the Monarch, it was basically like open season on the enemy ships that were left. And you can see 105,000 damage. I was relying on those torpedoes for the vast majority of my damage. It wasn't even until the end of the match that I really, or even the Leander, where I started relying on the bombs a little bit more just because I needed to get aircraft out. And I was wanting to try and get some damage in with something other than the torpedoes. But overall, it was not a bad match. In fact, this was, as I've already mentioned, was the best of 3 matches in the Kaga. So definitely something worth mentioning in that regard. This was the best match that I could come up with over the course of 3 consecutive matches. And definitely something that I think makes a decent testament to her capabilities in a perfect world scenario, which this definitely was. By comparison, this was what happened when I got up-tiered even by a Tier 9. And that was a Musashi and a Fletcher. That was it. Those were the only higher tiers. I mean, there were a handful of Tier 8s. There was also mostly Tier 7s. But even then, the effectiveness of the team was so much better. And yeah, let's just say my aircraft losses to just the handful of enemy ships that I was working on for the match that you're seeing the results for here, I lost 24 torpedo bombers, whereas over the course of an entire match against bottom tier, I lost 27. And I was losing planes to ships that aren't exactly well renowned for their AA either, like the Musashi. I mean, I lost 6 planes to the Musashi. Hell, I even lost a plane to the Fletcher. So definitely something to keep in mind there is that if she gets up-tiered or even just equal tier at all, her planes drop like flies. So you will definitely see her suffer very heavily if she is up-tiered at all. For the second match, we have the Saipan. And this, I will admit, this probably is not going to be the most stellar of matches. And that can be owed very much so to the fact that this was a Tier 8 across the board match. So equal Tier AA against and Tier 10 aircraft. Yes, the AA is going to be effective. Not as effective as if I were in a top tier match going against Tier 10 ships, but it is at least going to be damaging enough to cause concern in more than a couple of occasions. And especially as the match drags on, it will start having some notable effects overall regarding basically my attack strength and ability to continue putting out aircraft. I do rush forward enough to get spotting on ships before I utilize my speed to turn around a little bit and just line myself up on the ship that I decided I wanted to go for. And let's get a drop on the Baltimore. 11,000 is a nice solid hit. And I didn't lose any aircraft in performing the drop, but follow up, yeah, I did lose a plane. And that is going to be... that definitely does get felt. I also land almost 8,000 damage on the Bismarck, which, again, good, but unfortunately the group that actually performed the attack got shot down. The last aircraft I was able to salvage. So, I think that's one aircraft out of the strike group that I think actually makes it back to the CV. So, and again, this is also equal tier, or in regards to the aircraft themselves, about 2 tiers lower AA. So it is, again, going to be relevant. It is going to do damage. And if I play my cards wrong, I will definitely suffer the consequences. So I do try to minimize the damage that I take as much as I can, but there are some times where you just really can't avoid it. Like when you're trying to do your attack runs, you're kind of locked into a certain attack plane, as it were. So it can really affect your ability to dodge, weave, and otherwise just avoid taking any of the damage. And it also didn't exactly help too much that my attack runs on this first Bismarck were just lousy, to not put too fine a point on it. Fortunately, I do recover, I think, all of those, but nope. I recovered, I think, the first 2 aircraft from that attack group. So I will at least still have some torpedo bombers that are usable, but yeah, just a little too much AA for them to actually survive to get back in entirety. I do switch back over to the dive bombers because I wanted to see what I could do against the Bismarcks, and I'm not disappointed. I mean, there's 10,000 damage just from explosive damage to the Bismarck. Again, this is the routine HE dive bombs, so good solid damage in several respects, but if the Bismarck were to utilize its repair party, it would be able to repair most of this damage. I do, however, land a couple of fires that stick, and they are going to continue ticking away. And I decide at the last second to pull back the dive bombers, because that squadron was getting just a little too low for comfort. And switch back over to the torpedo bombers. And this is one of the things that I have mentioned several times, is the torpedo bombers, regardless, this is reliable damage. I can always depend on the torpedo bombers to finish targets off, etc. and so forth, where occasionally the bombs and rockets really just don't quite make it. Now, I do retask to try and finish off other targets. I line up this beautiful shot on enemy Bismarck, and it would have been a beautiful hit. Absolutely beautiful hit. Except the North Carolina got the hits out first. So, yeah, that's one situation in which my damage for the match could have been much better, but a teammate kind of robbed me of the damage. But overall, I think he definitely earned it. Definitely good work on his part. I'm not going to complain too much. I think he did the lion's share of damage to the Bismarck anyway. Now, though, we have the Hipper and the enemy Monarch left. The Hipper is kind of my priority because it has me spotted. It is actually a direct threat to my hull as we speak. So, yeah, I want to get it dead as quickly as I can. And unfortunately, it keeps turning around. I don't really get what has the appearances of being a really good drop on the Hipper. I think the one saving grace is that I did drop close, where by the time it had actually moved a good distance, the torpedoes were actually armed, and I do at least get in 3 good solid hits. So it at least turned into the torpedoes instead of away, making those hits possible. And teammate does finish it off because it only had like 500 health, and I wasn't going to get back there very quickly. The Monarch torps out again, and just trying to do what I can. And good, solid, all torps hit from that run. I do scramble my attack rockets to try and get out to it quickly enough to finish it off. But unfortunately, I just don't have enough time before teammate gets his rear guns in position and finishes the target off. Oh well, you can all see where there was definite potential for better damage for this match. I did still manage to come away with 99,000, and my earnings were not bad. I also had 11 torpedo hits. If the one striking against that Bismarck had gone through properly, that probably would have been more like 15 or 13. I did also land 13 bomb hits, which is nice and respectable. Caused 4 floods, 3 fires, and I think most of those were on that one poor Bismarck. 437 base EXP earned, which is reasonably respectable. And you can also see that I did a respectable amount of damage to most of the targets that I chose. I mean, 19,000 to the Hipper, 44,000 to the Bismarck that I got the kill credit for, 17,000 to the Monarch, 11,000 to the Baltimore. And a couple of these were ships that I only really made one run on. I mean, the Monarch, I only got one torpedo run on her. In fact, the one Bismarck, I really only got one attack run in. So, definitely respectable damage numbers. And the Saipan is probably one of the few cases where I can say that my dive bomb damage and my torpedo bomb damage were at least reasonably comparable. And of course, credit earnings were decent, EXP earnings were decent, and this was one of the few runs that I did not actually have any active modifier. Next up, we have the NCC 1701 Enterprise. Cue opening theme music. Oh, wait, wrong genre. Sorry, I had to make the joke. Enterprise is... I've found it to be a decent ship, and for a couple of the more surprising reasons. Now, I'm not going to go as far as saying that she would make a good starter ship. She is not like the Kaga. Her aircraft do resupply okay quickly, but she does have a rather limited deck space that does influence her capability to perform successive strikes as she loses more and more of her lower tier aircraft. Having said that, one of the things that I do like is the rocket attack reticle. It's actually you're actually looking at a wide attack reticle as opposed to a long attack reticle when you're looking at it, which makes it perfect for attacking small or lightly armored ships like destroyers and cruisers from the side instead of trying to come at them from the bow or stern. And this is because the attacks spread when the rockets come out, go out in a longitudinal axis instead of a horizontal axis, giving it a lot of strike power when you are looking at, again, lightly armored targets like destroyers and cruisers. If I were looking at any other aircraft carrier, I do not think I would have gotten even close to the attack strikes that I did relative to what I've already done in the Enterprise. I mean, I've already done 9,600 damage just to a Z-52, which, again, if I were to try this with any other aircraft carrier with their aiming reticle, in my experience so far, I'd be lucky to have like 3,000 damage right now. So definitely, I'm definitely liking the Enterprise for its attack rocket reticle at this point in time. It makes more sense to come at them from the side instead of from the front or stern. I mean, even that hit on the Hipper, 6,000 or 6,300 damage just from my rockets on the Hipper for one run. Come back around again And let's see... Yeah, another 6,500 damage. These are very respectable numbers for this type of attack plane, and I definitely think I will like the Enterprise for that specific reason. Unfortunately, the run on the Z-23 wasn't so good. I think I fired a little bit late, but I did manage one critical thing. I knocked out its engine. And apparently it had already used its damage control because it's slowing down. It's not moving too much. And this is something that I make specific note of as my torpedo bombers are scrambling out. So I'm watching it, making sure that it's not moving too much, and I say, "Crippled destroyer? Challenge accepted. Let's torpedo the sucker." So, yeah, just pull in, drop torps, it's not moving, it is a sitting duck. And I don't even have to look back to realize or know that I'm going to hit it. As far as everything else, Conqueror, Tier 10 AA, it's doing a number to my planes. I do get the drop off, but unfortunately, these planes are not making it back. They are too low tier, their survivability is not even remotely good enough, and yeah, there was just no way they were going to recover. Not looking at Tier 10 AA, not even remotely. I do pull out the dive bombers because I did want to give the AP dive bombs a try, see if I could get anything really reasonable with them.
Taking fire.
Yeah. Spoiler alert, I'm not gonna get anything really respectable with them at all. That just seems to be my luck with the AP dive bombs. I can't quite seem to drop them in a position to actually hit a citadel to save my life. I'm wondering if it's just that I'm choosing the wrong targets and the AP dive bombs are more suited towards cruisers than battleships, but yeah, there's... I'm really wondering. The strike does just barely get through. 2 planes actually make the drop, but none of them actually make it back to the aircraft carrier, which leaves me scrambling aircraft yet again, and I am back to torpedo bombers. Now, again, torpedo bombers are basically my go-to. They are consistent damage regardless, and yeah, I see no reason why I shouldn't use them as often as I possibly can. Especially when I'm looking at the AP dive bombers, which, for whatever reason, I can't get them to actually penetrate into citadels and actually do the damage that they're supposed to get. So, that's kind of one of the concerns that I have in mind in regards to the Enterprise. I'm wondering if the AP bomb penetration just kind of needs to be buffed a little bit. I don't know. Unfortunately, the Republic finishes off the North Carolina before my torpedoes make contact, leaving the enemy Amagi as the only viable target. And at this point, I'm kind of not wanting to charge right in on the Amagi right away, because I've got a couple of planes that are ready to die, and a couple of others that aren't exactly too healthy. But, on the plus side, the repair party for the planes just came back up, so I am able to get them healed up so that I can get my strike in. And, yeah, these are going to be some nice, solid hits. Torps away. Looking very, very good. 3 torps, 3 hits. Awesome. Unfortunately, they do start taking just a little bit too much damage, and I decide to pull them back before they get shot down. Unfortunately, pulling them back probably didn't do me any favors either, because they get shot down before they reach proper escape altitude anyway, so yeah. But nice thing is, I do still have a full deck of torpedo bombers if I should choose to go after them again. Now, I am back to the dive bombers, trying again for the citadels on the Amagi. Yeah. I've tried dropping from high, I've tried dropping from low, I've tried just about everything that I can think of in order to get citadels on any target with AP dive bombers. And honestly, if anybody has any suggestions that can guarantee dive bomb hits that go into the citadel, I'm all ears, because honestly, as far as I'm concerned, I'm getting fed up with it. I'm almost wondering why I even have them. So yeah, that's just one of my sources of consternation in dealing with the aircraft carriers. Any aircraft carrier, for that matter. I mean, HE dive bombers are one thing. I can get consistent damage with them, and the damage does what it's supposed to do. The AP dive bombers, I would think that they would be a little bit better than they are. Now, this is the last attack squadron I do get out. It is my torpedo bombers again. I was watching this North Carolina thinking it's probably going to finish off the Amagi, or the Amagi's going to ram it. But then the Amagi decided to charge into the island. And it does actually finish off the North Carolina too, which is more damage for me to farm. Lord knows our Republic isn't even in the same postal code at the moment. So torpedo bombers in, drops out, and gonna have nice solid hits. Do cause a flood. Unfortunately, the flood doesn't really stick, so I'm gonna have to come back around and try again. But at this point, the Amagi is also on such low health, even one torp is gonna be more than enough to take her out. I just kind of sit outside of her AA range just long enough to get my attack run lined up nicely before I drop in, initiating the run. Use my last heal charge to make sure that all of them get in, make the drop, and good night. Goodbye, Amagi. Overall, not bad, again, as far as the earnings, but one of the surprising statistics, 51 rocket hits. This is more than I've gotten on any other aircraft carrier, bar none. I also did 80,404 damage on a bottom tier match, so this is reasonably respectable. Definitely better off than I certainly thought that match was going to be, to not put too fine a point on. I do apologize, I did kind of exit out a little bit earlier. I was trying to figure out where the 1000 free EXP came from, because that was just kind of a okay, I don't know where that came from sort of moment. But overall, I mean, 11 torpedo hits, 9 bomb hits, 2 ship kills, 1 fire, 5 defended ribbons, 51 rocket hits, and a large number of those even penetrated the ships that I was shooting at. So definitely some surprising numbers in that regard as far as I was concerned. I was also top of the team despite being bottom tier with 554 base EXP. Definitely reasonable numbers, again, all around for a bottom tier match. This match could have gone very differently. Overall, 13,000 damage done by bombs, 39,000 damage done by torpedoes. Surprisingly, 24,000 damage done by my rockets. So very, very good solid numbers. And on top of that, 51 rockets out of 90 fired actually hit the target. So very, very good solid numbers. Definitely more than I have seen in any other aircraft carrier so far. But the other thing that I do want to note is look at how many aircraft I lost over the course of this match. The Benefit, of course, being that these are lower tier planes, so they did replenish reasonably quickly to at least keep my squadrons full over the course of the match. But if I had taken many more losses, I probably would have been waiting for my squadrons to actually resupply fully. Because the Enterprise's deck size really is not that big, and these are still under-tiered planes, so that's just kind of one of the things to keep in mind, and I suppose can make her a little bit more demanding. Granted, she's not as forgiving as the Kaga, and that's why the Kaga places higher, in my opinion, relative to her in regards to her, I guess I could say her recommendation value. But overall, she's definitely a good, strong contender, and I think very capable of earning the 3rd slot in my recommendation list from the perspective of a new player. Last but not least, we come to the Graf Zeppelin. Congratulations if you've watched all the way through at this point. We are on the final match, so it's almost over, and you will be able to move on with your day shortly. I do scatter my torpedo bombers right off the bat, and mainly because these are among the fastest of the planes that I have. I honestly have... I've seen limited use for the actual rocket attack planes on the Graf Zeppelin. Primarily because they have big rockets that have high penetration. They are almost worthless against lightly armored targets like destroyers or even light cruisers. Granted, the light cruisers can at least eat some more of the damage than, say, a destroyer, but I've seen her rockets just overpen destroyers for miles and basically do negligible to no damage. So I would very much prefer to stick with the torpedo bombers or even the dive bombers for any damage at all, and just focus on the heavier targets from light cruisers on up. The Graf Zeppelin is definitely not what I would consider to be an anti-destroyer aircraft carrier. I think the only thing you're really relying on as far as the Graf Zeppelin, if you're even attempting to go after destroyers, is the chance of detonating. But
heavy gale moving in.
Even then, your chances of that are really not great as far as I've noticed. Unfortunately, I did wander into the Worcester's UA or AA bubble, and you can see that these low health planes really hate AA. They hate AA with a passion. And that's because they get shredded extremely quickly. Now, one of the things that I did try doing with this match, and I have to say it kind of failed spectacularly. I think granted I probably just did it wrong, but I tried doing slingshotting to get my bomb hits in, but I think I actually just lost more than I really managed to get in, because I mean I completely missed the Worcester first of all, or the Worcester, and I didn't even really get a run in on the North Carolina either. The planes just disappeared. So I'm not thinking I'm going to try that too much again. It seems a little bit too involved, and in some ways even a little bit too indirect for my tastes. So, I mean, if you all want to try it, that's entirely up to you. If you can get it to work, awesome. I'm not thinking I'm going to try it anymore. It seems counterintuitive in a lot of regards. I think I just wasted a lot more than I actually succeeded at getting in at that point. But the nice thing, again, with these aircraft is that they have a nice, good boost. They have a very high speed. And you can see that I mean, I was able to charge basically right out of the North Carolina and Monarch's AA ranges before they even really did much to me. And I am in turn capable of charging right back in the same fashion and landing hits. And these torps aren't exactly light damage torps either. They do quite a substantial amount of damage to enemy ships and can be very rewarding as long as you aim them right. The other nice thing that I've noticed, at least in regards to the Graf Zeppelin, especially in regards to her torpedo bombers as well, is that they have a very short arming distance. I think it's only like 530 or 490 something meters. It's very, very short arming distance. So you can almost drop these torps right on top of targets and basically be guaranteed to hit 1 or 2 torpedoes each time as long as your aim is good. Compare this to, say, the US carriers, which have, yeah, they've got more attack power, or they've got longer arming times, and they may have faster torps, but you do have to drop them a little bit farther back, and it can just be harder to get consistent hits. And by the way, that right there, 8,000 damage with rocket attack on the, what was it, Monarch? That's one of the cases in point for these rocket attack planes. They are better at going after heavier targets like heavy cruisers and battleships. The rockets are that they just have too much penetration capacity against lightly armored targets. So against heavy targets, you can get some good damage with the rocket attack planes. Against lighter targets, not so much. I do get in a nice, beautiful run on the North Carolina, and that was actually the only Citadel that I got for the day of doing any of these aircraft carrier battles. Was that one strike on North Carolina with the Graf Zeppelin's dive bombers. Yeah. My luck, or my aim with the AP dive bombers literally sucks that bad. So, yeah, there is that. Beyond that, I mean, this match kind of stands out in a lot of regards, showing, though, what I mean when I think the Graf Zeppelin is probably not the aircraft carrier that you want to be going for if you are just starting to learn CVs. Yes, the speed of the aircraft can make them a little bit more forgiving trying to blast through AA bubbles. But if you're trying to use them for just all-around purposes, she really is a niche case. She really doesn't perform well going against lightly armored targets, and her attack runs, her attack speeds are high enough where you really have to know a little bit more of what you're doing between getting into and out of AA bubbles, dodging AA, etc., so forth, where you really want to know what you're doing before you get in with the Graf Zeppelin. The same could be said even when you were working with her back during the RTS. Her planes were not exactly survivable, even as they are right now. And she had very situational survivability in a lot of regards. Definitely not something that you want to be trying to mess around with or really trying to learn when you're just starting to get the swing of aircraft carriers. So, I mean, there you have it. Once you do understand what you're doing with aircraft carriers, I would definitely say, go ahead, get the Graf Zeppelin. She is a fun experience. But you, again, do want the experience of working with aircraft carriers first. Because otherwise, I think she's just not going to perform quite the way you would expect or want her to. So on that note, just to kind of recap and go over everything, As far as my recommendation for new players getting into aircraft carriers and they want to get one of the premium CVs, I would definitely recommend the Kaga first and foremost, the Saipan being a reasonable second, closely followed by the Enterprise, and lastly the Graf Zeppelin. And of course, all of these aircraft carriers are more than capable of performing very well in the hands of experienced players, but when you're starting off new, I definitely think the Kaga, despite her lack of performance against higher tier ships, will definitely do better for you, just because she is a little bit more forgiving between the health pool of the hull and just her overall squadron size and the resupply time of her aircraft. Beyond that, the Saipan, again, has survivability in favor of a large deck space, and she is less forgiving of mistakes, but she is also very effective in schooling you to avoid making those mistakes. So the Saipan does get a very, very strong second, in my opinion, relative to the Kaga. And of course the Enterprise is usable, but I just don't think she is different enough from any of her techline counterparts to really make her a standout ship. And last but not least, the Graf Zeppelin is very much more of I think, a CV expert level ship, just due to the maneuverability of her aircraft and the fact that she's just a little bit more demanding in some respects. Again, I was running modifiers with the Graf Zeppelin, so ignore the EXP and credit earnings. Just look at the damage. 124, almost 125,000 damage done, 20 torpedo hits, 2 real bomb hits, but also 32 rocket hits. 521 base EXP earned, that is a stat that I can use. Very, very respectable, to say the least. 63,000 damage done just with torpedoes, 10,000 damage done from bombs, another 30,000 damage done to primarily heavy targets with the rockets, so very good solid damage in those regards, plus another 22,000 damage done between the various fires and floods that she set. And because this is an aircraft carrier, she also got a decent amount of spotting damage. But on the other hand, look at how many planes I lost again. 18 torpedo bombers, 14 dive bombers, and 18 rocket attack planes. So these very low survivability aircraft are very intolerant of mistakes from the player. If you get anywhere near a ship that has even marginally good AA, this ship does suffer. Further exemplifying why I think she is much more of a demanding aircraft carrier, and definitely much better for a player who has a little bit of time under their belts with CVs and knows a little bit more of what they're doing between dodging flak, so on and so forth. And even then, sometimes you're just not going to be able to survive your drops sometimes. And just overall, again, looking at the results, again, keep in mind there were some pretty heavy modifiers here from flags and whatnot. Overall, for the match, I probably would have earned about 80,000 credits if this had been without any of the major modifiers. So, just kind of keeping that in mind. Now, one thing that I do want to mention right off the bat is that I almost did not have a review up here for the USS Enterprise. And that is primarily because when I was starting to put this video together, I actually did not have her. I decided to drop and get, I think it was 10 of the naval aviation crates, and I just got lucky and managed to get her from one of those crates. And as a result, I was able to actually put the video up with her in the in the running as far as being able to form a direct opinion on her. And I will kind of backtrack a little bit here and state that it was actually the Graf Zeppelin I did 4 matches in. I kept trying to find... I did one extra match because I was trying to find a match where I had a decent run against maybe lower tier ships, and I just kind of wasn't finding it. So again, that's just kind of where I ended up. And you can see that my results really weren't phenomenal and this was partly because I was looking at matches where I just got up-tiered in some ways very heavily. So I wanted something that was a little bit better than 40,000 damage. The worst one, of course, was the one that you're seeing the results for in the background here, where I came across a Salem, Tashkent Daring, and a decent array of relatively strong AA ships. Yeah, that match just was absolutely lousy. It was... I mean, yeah, I still managed to pull off a profit on her, sure, but just still lousy match overall. Anyway, on that note, I hope you all have found this video informative and enjoyable. I do want to say thank you again to Miss Chloe Holroyd for suggesting it, and I hope it helps you out moving forward. Anyway, I hope you all take care. Happy hunting. Stay safe out there, folks. Have a good one.